Hi, everybody. This is Rose Odette with the Michigan Innovation Podcast. And today we have Barbara Jordan with us. How you doing today, Barbara?
Great. I'm great. It was a
Good.
great drive to Cadillac.
Yeah, good.
Sunny and warm and green grass.
You think spring is really here this time?
I think it finally
I
is.
hope
I'm hoping
so.
so. We've had a
Me
tough
too.
winter, but we've gotten through it.
I know, and it just kept teasing us that it was going to be nice out, and then it would snow, and then it would be nice, and then it would snow. It was just really driving us crazy. Well, you know what we do now on this Michigan Innovation Podcast. We get to know a little bit about Barbara and like what makes her tick. And also, thanks again for being on the podcast. But share with us a little bit about your passions and what you like to do when you're not working.
Okay. Do you want to maybe start? You talked about a little bit about me, and
Yeah,
so
please.
I'll just tell you a little bit about where I'm from.
Yes,
So I'm
perfect.
originally from the east side of the state, so around a suburb of Detroit. Always been a Michigan girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved after I graduated from high school. I went to Michigan State. I know, I think you went there
I
too,
did
right?
too,
Yeah.
right?
Hello,
Go,
Smarty.
hello, Smarty, or
Yeah.
go green.
Go white.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I graduated there with a degree in education.
Okay.
And while I was at State, I also worked as a sideline professional musician. So I was in some bands in
Wow.
college. And
Professional musician. That is so unusual.
yeah,
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I started in high school, basically. And, it was when the folk scene was really big. So,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
that's how
Joan
old I am.
Baez.
Joni
Oh,
Mitchell.
Joni
She was a
Mitchell. Oh,
big,
yes. I saw her one time.
that's awesome.
I
I would
did.
have loved to have seen her live.
But it wasn't back in the day. It was like, I think it was in the 90s yeah, the 90s I saw her. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
Pine Knob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I did go to Pine Knob concerts. That was
Mm-hmm.
great. So I wrote my first song in high school, did a folk concert there, and
Nice.
so caught the bug of songwriting. Been writing songs ever since.
Who knew? That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So while
Yep, such a creative person.
well, it's been fun. It's really
Mhm.
been, yeah, a lot of great experiences through that.
Cool.
So while I taught, I was always doing music, and I even brought the guitar into the classroom sometimes.
Oh, what grades did you teach?
Fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Oh, I bet they loved that.
They did. It was kind of a reward for,
Oh.
okay, we get our work done, we get a chance to sing.
Oh, I bet they
So,
just loved that.
yeah.
I know if I was in that class, I would have loved it, especially at any age, because
Wow.
music is the international or the language, right? It just
Yeah.
goes up all ages, all cultures.
It was, yeah, it's a great thing to have. I'm really
Very
blessed
true.
to that I've been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So then, interesting that through that, I was working a gig. I stayed in Lansing and taught for a while.
Mm.
And then I started working on my master's degree in guidance counseling. And at one of my solo gigs at a beer and wine and sandwich shop, that's a whole other story. I got a job offer to teach at a community college, a local community college in their management development center through that music job.
Isn't that something?
So it's interesting. I feel like my career found me. I don't know if I found it.
Wow.
But once I started teaching there and I really loved it and never finished my master's in guidance counseling and started just teaching some adults. And then the recession hit of the 80s and got laid off. And so then I ended up moving to Grand Rapids, and that's when I got into the corporate world. Got a job at some large national organizations, like 2,000 member. So it was a great experience. And
I love the work ethic in Grand Rapids.
It was great.
It is. I just love working with the people. Kind of old culture, very, very, very friendly, but very hardworking people.
You got it. That is exactly the culture.
Right.
So I worked internally as a trainer, did a lot of workshops, but then I also started working as an internal consultant and got some just amazing training certifications at that time. So that really helped launch me into my own business.
So when did you do that? When did you go into your own?
You want the actual year?
No, well, whereabouts? Yeah, the actual year.
But before Facebook, we'll say that.
Okay.
So it's been actually about 35 years.
Fantastic. Well, hey, You have a lot of good experience, and that's what people need. They don't want to call a consultant that's, wet behind the ears.
Right.
They need to have had something they can, pull from
Yeah.
so that
Well,
they can give guidance.
yeah, it's not just consulting from a book, it's consulting from real life experience,
Right.
having lived those things. And in fact, more recently, throughout my career, occasionally I would take jobs in a nonprofit or, in fact, every job that I actually ended up taking in those 35 years that were not self-employment usually came to me from somebody asking me, could you help us out?
Oh.
So my most recent one was in 2018, and I was working at a global tech data firm,
Mm.
director of HR. And so 2 years after I got hired, the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
So being in a senior leadership position at that point and being in HR, we were in, I think, about 7 different countries.
Wow.
It was very challenging.
Mm.
And so it really, that was another level of learning for me.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
it helped put me front and center at what a lot of organizations and leaders are dealing with
Mm.
now, because we're still living in the post-pandemic.
Wow, that's amazing. So that must have been really tough. So I just wanted to take a moment because what that brought up in my mind is that I wanted to make a statement in today's podcast that we've been doing this podcast for about a year and we've had about 50 people on the podcast. And so a couple months ago, and we were offering this to Barb too, is that if you want to be a contributor, any of the folks that have been on the podcast, they've chosen to be a contributor to an anthology. And we are wrapping up the anthology this summer. And each person that's been on the podcast that chose to take a chapter in the book will be in our very first edition of the Michigan Innovation book. And so when she brought up the story about the pandemic, I just thought, what a great chapter that would be in the book. So we've got Travis Connect going to be in the book. We've got Will Kitchen with Oops is going to be in the book. We've got Brittany Vanderbeek with Illuminate Possibilities is in the book. And Nick Olson with Elevate Climbing Gym. And hopefully we'll have about 9 to 10 different authors that will be joining me in that anthology. And those that are not going to be in this one, they could be in the next edition. So I just wanted to let you know that, and it'll be coming out probably this fall. So keep an eye out for that, everyone. And I think you would have a great chapter on the pandemic, because that sounds like it was, whoa,
Yeah.
that had to be hard.
It was challenging, but it's a great example of how a challenge can become an opportunity.
Exactly. And we can learn from those things.
Yeah.
What a great story that would be. Well, let's get into this.
Okay.
Let's get in. So I love your journey and your background so far, and you've built over the years such an impressive career. I want to really get into all of the neat things that you're doing now in leadership and coaching. And so your business name is the Center for Coaching and Leadership
Development.
The Center for Coaching and Leadership Development. Now, is there a website for that?
There is.
And I'll put that in the show notes so we don't have to drag you through that URL right now.
Okay.
But we definitely are going to want you to check that out. Even if you're able to check it out as soon as possible, that would be fantastic. And you also do the Leadership Lunch Club. And so tell us what inspired you to do the coaching business, and then we'd like to learn a little bit more about the Leadership Lunch Club. But I don't want you to go speedy on either one because we want to know the whole scoop.
Okay. So the Center for Coaching and Leadership Development when I first started my business in Grand Rapids. It was called Training Design, because I mainly was focusing on offering workshops and creating curriculum for companies. And what helped me launch for the entrepreneurs out there, and as any entrepreneur would know, sometimes when you tell people you're going to launch a business, sometimes you get the naysayers. Are you sure you want to do that? And there's already a lot of consultants, and I was in my early 30s at the time. And, they said, you're first of all, you're female, our male executive is going to take you seriously. And then I was this little thing, and I look young, and those were the days. And I remember, like, it was when I left teaching, I was walking down the hall and somebody asked me for my hall pass. So that's when they were saying, is somebody going to take you seriously? So, but I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
It doesn't go, and I go back and get a full-time job. And I never had issues. There was just maybe one time where I was in a situation where I asked somebody else to work with the client because they kind of, I could tell that they were going to connect better with the guy. And
Yeah,
he
I've
came
been
in
there,
and
done that. Yep.
that worked well. And
Okay.
so I think one of the turning points was when I was doing workshops, and I did this workshop on problem solving. And I said to the participants, now go and use this and apply it over the next week and come back and tell me about it. And this guy comes in, it was a manufacturing company, and comes out, worked on the floor, and he said, this stuff doesn't work. And I said, well, tell me about this stuff doesn't work. And he said, well, I went back to my boss and with an idea on how we could reduce setup time. He was working on a machine. And the boss just said, basically, Joe, there you are, just trying to find a way to get out of work. And what I realized is that I could train people on things, but if they went back and were working in a culture or a system that didn't support that, I was just setting them up to fail. And so that's when I shifted and my business became Jordan Training and Consulting, which is basically my umbrella LLC.
Okay.
And so I ended up expanding more into the consulting area and then eventually more coaching. And in more recent years, when I decided to focus more on coaching and leadership development, because I feel like as the leaders go, so goes the organization a lot, that was where I could make the biggest impact.
So leadership. So tell me a little bit more about your leadership coaching.
Well, in terms of my process,
Well, without giving away
oh,
anything.
that's fine. I think it's pretty standard. But it depends on what people come to
Okay.
meet with. So I always, and one of the things I do, and that's on my website, is somebody can have a free 30-minute consultation.
Okay.
Because I think it's important to have a good fit. You have to be
Yes.
a good fit.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, first of all, what are their goals? What are they looking for? And a lot of times it's they're either feeling stuck in an area, or a lot of times, they say it's lonely at the top.
Oh, yeah.
Leaders need a sounding board oftentimes. And a lot of times it's people issues, it's team issues. So, one of the things I do, and I truly believe this about leadership development, it starts with the person. So I do a lot of work in emotional intelligence. And one of the linchpin competencies of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So I usually start there and help the leader and myself. I want to get to know them so I can best help them, but they need to know themselves. So I use some tools and assessments, certified in a variety of areas, including in the area of emotional intelligence. I'm a Gallup Strength Finder coach. So I use Strength Finder, I use DISC. Sometimes, if they're having trouble with conflict, there's a conflict style inventory that I may use. And I just feel like they have to know themselves, because one of the things they say is when it rains on the leader, everybody gets wet.
Oh, that's right.
So who the leader is impacts the environment. And that's really some of the theory behind emotional intelligence. The leader creates a resonance in the environment that they're in. So it's either resonance, positive resonance, or it's dissonance. And it affects everybody. And the other thing that I have learned, and why I think leadership development is so important, is that people, when they leave jobs, 50% of people don't really leave the company. They leave the leader. They leave the boss.
Wow.
And 70%, because I work a lot with Gallup. So Gallup does a lot of research. And they say that 70% of the employee engagement levels are impacted by somebody's supervisor. So they experience the environment, the culture, and even their job satisfaction, literally mainly through their relationship with their boss.
So it's so important that leader has a very healthy self-image and a healthy culture.
Well, yeah, not only self-image, they have skills. Like one of the things about emotional intelligence is it's not only self-awareness, but self-awareness helps them know how to manage their own responses.
Okay.
So managing how they respond to situations is critical, but also the other dimensions of emotional intelligence are social awareness. So we're becoming aware of what's happening. In other words, can we read the room?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when somebody's checking out? Do you know when somebody's confused? Do you know are you picking up the social cues that are going on out there? And then how are you responding to that?
Right.
So it's what's going on inside of us and how are we responding? In other words, sometimes we get really frustrated. I've worked with people in my coaching
Mm-hmm.
where they've come and sometimes they come on their own and sometimes they've been recommended to me by their company. So an example of that is I worked with somebody in a firm one time, and very, very smart because Daniel Goleman, who's kind of the father of emotional intelligence, has done a study, and he found out that 80 to 90% of the success of a leader is not IQ. It's not how smart you are. It's EQ. It's how emotionally intelligent you are. And so this person was very smart, but not very emotionally intelligent, could not control their emotions. And so when they got upset, they'd get angry, they'd throw things.
Oh, geez.
And it was holding them back.
Yeah. The culture would be fearful of the leader who acts like that.
And it was holding her back from being promoted.
Yeah.
And yeah, another situation, somebody was not reading their clients correctly.
Okay.
And the client would ask a question. It's that old, tell me what time it is. And the other person just basically goes on and tells them how the watch works.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good answer.
So we
Good
worked
metaphor.
on that.
Very cool. Well, yeah, has coaching changed recently in the last few years? What do you see changing? It sounds like, I just know that as things progress, the world changes. You work through the pandemic. Now we're all coming back together. How are you coaching differently in times like these?
Well, I think one thing that has happened in the realm of coaching is remote coaching has gotten more popular.
And does that work?
It does. I mean, the thing with coaching now is you can be coaching people from around the world.
Wow.
And so it really gives a lot more options in terms of your client base. It also gives people more flexibility because a lot of times leaders especially are very time constrained. And so when they don't have to travel to go somewhere, and it's important you have your camera on and so on, but that remote coaching I think has become.
Do they bring their best to you? Sometimes people get so distracted when they're on a Zoom call. How do you get them to really be there with you?
Right. Well, I think we set that up ahead of time in the guidelines. Turn your phone off. Don't be doing other work.
Right.
No, we're going to stay pretty focused. So
Good.
I haven't really run into that too
That's
much.
good.
As
That's your
problem.
persona.
Plus, they're also paying.
Yeah, they don't want to waste their money.
Exactly. Exactly. Waste their time or money.
Right.
Yeah, and I think with coaching, what I was talking about, I think brain science, emotional intelligence is coming in more and more.
How so? Brain science. What does that mean?
With emotional intelligence, I mean, when I talked about creating resonance or dissonance, our ability to basically control our own emotions and respond to others is going to create that environment. They say that one of the main responsibilities of a leader is to prime good feelings in their team. Because the better people feel about where they're working, they're more productive and so on. But one of the things that I run into, and the examples I described, is what brain science would call an amygdala hijack. It's that part of our brain, our fight or flight part of our brain, that when we perceive a threat, we tend to respond in certain ways. We tend to go in survival mode.
Right.
And when, it's one thing if you hear you think you hear a bear rustling in the woods. But if when somebody confronts you or a situation happens and you perceive it as a threat and you respond that way, your amygdala fires and you're no longer in your rational brain. And so that's where I think it's an understanding of we have to be able to go from our primitive reactive brain into our more rational brain in helping to respond. And so when I coach people in that area, I ask them, what triggered you? Do you know what's going on inside of you? Do you know what's triggering you?
Wow. So when you do that, do they end up being sounds like this could be a long process. I'm thinking 6 months minimum, because that take, you get to know each other, you read, you figure out who they are, what they're about,
Mhm.
and then they have to trust you, and then they have to feel comfortable giving you these stories of situations that
Right.
occurred. So that doesn't happen overnight.
Right. The nice thing about coaching, though, is there's a confidentiality expectation.
Hmm.
And that's why I offer a free 30 minutes ahead of time. You have to feel comfortable. And I do say that everything that gets shared is confidential.
Hmm.
And so you have to create a safe environment for people to share. So, you bring up a really good point, because I think one of the misperceptions about coaching is, oh, I can get 1 or 2 sessions and I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah, it's
But
not
you
like
don't
that.
think that when you go to the gym. You don't go,
Right.
okay, I want to get in shape. All right, I went for an hour. I think
Yeah,
I'm good. I
yeah,
think I'm
that's it.
good.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is probably a very, very big misconception. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just, I know the guy I used to work with, he would just say, just do your job. Just
Mhm.
get out of my office and do your job,
Boy, I
And
bet that was motivating.
yeah, and they then I would be left picking up the pieces. And
Mhm.
he was a genius, a real
Mhm.
genius. So intelligent, really could design systems that were very ahead of their time, so
Mhm.
creative,
Mhm.
and but was really very, and I think he was nervous around the employees.
So that was not his comfort level, the people
No,
side.
right, right. So he wasn't comfortable with them, and so
Mhm.
um, it was really hard for him. And
Mhm.
we didn't really, coaching wasn't a thing back in the
Mhm.
early, in
Right.
my early career. This is something that's very commonplace now. You hear
Right.
about coaching a lot, but I remember the first time I was introduced to coaching, it was like I had to really think about it, because coaches basically, professional athletes had coaches,
Right.
like they had their own coach. And I thought, well, I'm not a professional athlete, so how does that work?
Right.
But, things have changed so much, and they continue to evolve,
Right.
like you just
Right.
described.
Well, you bring up a good point too, because people, a lot of times, I think when coaching first started, people thought it was just for people struggling with issues.
Hmm.
And now it's really looked at as a growth strategy,
All right.
that you want to get better. And I mean, now it's suggested that everybody have a coach
It
at
is.
one point. And what I find is coaching is more impactful than training, because you're dealing real time with issues as they come up. We're coming up with strategies to deal with just in time, which
Hmm.
doesn't always happen. Sometimes in training, you get trained and then you don't apply it for weeks, and
Hmm.
it's a general class and it's not personalized. So coaching, I think, is one of the most powerful growth strategies.
Mm. Now that's different. So it's a growth strategy in your mind, in your practice.
Mm-hmm.
I have never heard that before.
Mm.
I've normally it's about help me deal with these issues we have.
Ah, okay.
And so I think, and if you're like me, that would be something super unique that Barbara brings to the table that, I'd want to do a deeper dive if I were you listening to this to see, okay, so let's say you may think coaching isn't something that I really need. I seem to be able to read the room. I'm able to, make my team feel pretty comfortable. But like if you're stuck like if your business is like some of those second stage companies that I work with, kind of plateauing. Maybe what you need is a coach to help you grow,
To
do
take it
some
to the
growth,
next level,
get it to the next
or to
level.
develop your team to the next level. I
Right.
mean, yeah, it's great to be able to get better.
Yeah. Oh, I
Mhm.
love that idea. It's a brand new one for me today. So, regarding the education, before we move on to the Leadership Lunch Club, I want to ask you a little bit more about education.
Mhm.
And because that's your degree is
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
education, and that's where you began. And so, do you still do education? Do you have, let's say, workshops, so that type of thing? Do you do any, or is it pretty much all coaching?
I still do some training. I
Do
still do
you?
some training.
What
And
for, like, how do you, what's that like?
well, for some of the assessments that I do, like Strength Finders.
Okay.
So I help people understand the value of utilizing and understanding their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very, very powerful tool. I know that's become more popular out there. But the whole concept of, I think one of the myths is we need to work on our weaknesses most of the time.
Mm.
But if we work on our weaknesses, we may get better, this much better.
Mm.
But if we build on a strength, we get this much better.
Oh.
And so, it's and it also involves brain science, because literally when we are operating in our area of strength, our brain, they've literally done studies on this, our brain literally lights up.
Aw.
So one of the things I do in that workshop, people take the assessment and then we unpack it and we help them to understand that. I also do training on emotional intelligence,
Okay.
helping people understand that. I work with 360 emotional intelligence assessments where they get feedback. That's another way of developing emotional intelligence. I do a lot of training on the people side, communication skills, conflict resolution, because those are key emotional intelligence skills. So I just did a
Absolutely.
workshop just last week.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to meet Barbara. I'm going to get to know her better. And this is so much fun for me today because I love that. Don't you? You'll really love to learn about what we, know thyself. To know thyself
Yeah.
is that Shakespeare line, right? And different ways, especially if you are in business or you're so consumed with the day to day and the busy schedule, and sometimes you don't even know yourself at all because you let time slip and things go and go and go. So I have a question about Gallup versus DISC versus Strength Finders. When do you use which tool?
Well, that's a really good question, because it's like, it's like a carpenter has a tool box.
Yeah.
And you have to know what tool to use for what.
Okay.
So Strength Finder is really to identify your natural talents. What are you naturally good at? And I think I really want to recommend this to entrepreneurs to take this too, because I think knowing what you're naturally good at and what you're not good at is important, because if you try to be really good at what you're not good at, it's going to be draining. You're not going to be that good at it. But so you have to know sometimes how to partner. So that's one of the things I talk about is the power of partnerships when knowing your strengths. And the example I use is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak for
Oh
Apple.
my gosh.
I mean, when you think about
That's chapter 9 in my book. It's about the dynamic dual leadership model.
There you go.
Oh, high five, lady. I didn't know that. You did that.
So,
Boy, we're so aligned on that.
Yeah. So that then Steve Jobs is the visionary and
Exactly.
Steve Wozniak
He
makes
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
Well, same with Bill Gates and Paul Allen.
Mhm.
Exactly the same.
Right.
Same
And see,
dynamic.
So to me, that's being aware of where's my sweet spot and how do I partner with somebody who can complement me. The same thing goes even if you're working in an organization. Who do you hire? A lot of times we tend to hire people like us, and we really need complement. Or when we're on a project, we need people with different skill sets. So when I do this in organizations and people find out who's the strategic thinkers, who's the good executors, when we have a project, we need to move something forward. How do we get those diversity of thinking styles? So that's Strength Finders.
So that's Strength Finders.
Yeah.
So you dig deep, and like Steve was very good with the technology. Wozniak like they call him, was the techie.
Right.
And Jobs wasn't just the visionary; he was also able to articulate like the vision.
Good communicator.
Very good communicator. So thank you. And now, which then
with DISC?
Yeah, DISC.
So DISC is more personality style, and it measures basically our style on 2 continuums, our orientation toward how we approach tasks, and our orientation on how we approach relationships. So it's very user friendly. It's one of the most validated instruments in the world, and it's been translated in many languages. And it's I think it's another self-awareness tool.
Right.
Because, it's like, okay, are you the 30,000-foot person, or are you the person that's in the detail? And when you have a certain job or whatever, I mean, if you need detail, okay, use that person. The other thing too is speaking people's language. That's important. So if I have somebody on my team, somebody that I'm working with that wants the detail, I need to give them the detail. If I have somebody that's 30,000 foot, do not spend a lot of time on the detail. Your eyes will roll back in the head. So you want to give them the executive summary. So
Mhm.
it not only helps us understand our strengths, and by the way, we always say that every strength overuse can become a limitation. So if
Hmm.
you know that's part of self-awareness, maybe I'm so 30,000 foot view that I can't seem to bring it down to earth. It's like sometimes when I have people like that in meetings, we're doing strategic planning. It's like, let's land the plane. You have to land the plane at some
Wow.
point. So
I
that's
never
very
heard that either, Barb, that a strength could be your weakness. I mean,
overused.
it's like it sounds like a greeting card, but it, I can see that happening.
Mhm. And
It,
in Gallup, what we say is it's either misused, it's misaimed. So you can have a great skill, but you're not aiming it correctly.
mm,
You're misusing it. So with all of those, there is no good or bad strengths or styles. It's, are you using the correct tool for the situation?
mm,
So if the situation calls for vision, we need division. If it calls for execution, then we need to, look at some of the details.
right.
So, but I've been in meetings where you've got a visionary and we're at the execution, they're getting very impatient because they don't realize that that's needed, and you need to just cool it for a bit because
Mm-hmm.
this is not your wheelhouse, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very, very needed. And the thing I love about it is you gain an appreciation for people who are different. You go, I need you. I
Mm-hmm.
really need you. I couldn't do it without you.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so positive.
Hmm.
That's so positive. Wow. And what's Gallup?
Well, Gallup is the organization that puts the Strength Finder out.
Oh,
Gallup is
okay.
known for doing a lot of research, a lot of surveys,
Right.
but
I
one,
remember that. They
yeah,
would do the polling,
yes.
Gallup
And they
polling.
also do, I mean, employee engagement surveys. So I've
Oh,
been
okay.
trained in that also. It's the Q12. They have 12 questions that basically help identify employee engagement levels.
Hmm. Nice. And so if a company wanted to, and this comes up a lot, I go to a lot of conferences, and when executives and business owners and they just want to keep their employees engaged.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of disengagement. They come to work and they just don't. And so those are the types of things you help them with engaging.
Right. Well, we measure it, first of all. I mean, first of all, it's
Oh,
nice to know where are you at right now.
and get a gap analysis
Yes,
kind of done.
because then you can implement strategies, and then a year later you can resurvey and go, did we improve employee engagement? And by the way,
Hmm.
Gallup has done studies that worldwide we are very low engagement.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that I just read a book by Brian Tracy called Full Engagement. I don't know if you know him.
Hmm.
He's a great guy.
Hmm.
And that was an interesting read. I
Hmm.
really liked learning about that. Wonderful. Well, take us into the Leadership Lunch Club if you're ready. Can
Sure,
you tell us a little bit about that great event that you've had in Traverse City
sure. Uh,
for many years, I hear?
yeah, we started it in 2012.
Wow,
So
that's a track record.
yeah, it's been great. I've loved it. I mean, it fulfills my passion for equipping. When I look at what's the common thread through my whole life, and my passion, it's been equipping people.
Equipping. I've never heard that. What is equipping?
Basically, when you're equipped, you have what you need to do whatever you want to do.
Awesome.
So you're going on a trip, you're going on a hike, you take your equipment with you, you got your backpack and your shoes and your, tent and whatever. So, even at a young age, uh, I was in junior high, and I went to the public library, and I remember taking out a book. It was by John. I still remember this. It was by John Holt. It was called Why Children Fail. And it
Hmm.
was really more about why schools are failing and not educating kids as well as they could be. And that touched something in me because I remember even thinking at that. And by the way, the librarian, when I went to check it out, said, honey, this is an adult book. And I said, but I want it. And
Oh.
I read it, and it really hit me that, if we have tools, if kids have tools, if we can read and do math and have all those things, we have options.
Hmm.
And the more options you have, the more quality of life you can have.
Hmm.
So that's just something I believe in, is innate in me, that I love to give people tools. So the Leadership Lunch Club was a way to help equip the community, because coming from Grand Rapids and having worked with large corporate organizations with big budgets, and coming to Traverse City, I realized we're mainly a community of small businesses. And we were coming out of the recession in 2012, and there was a lot of businesses struggling, some going out of business. And I thought, is there anything I could do to help?
Mm.
If these businesses and business owners were maybe a little better equipped, could that have made a difference? And so I thought, well, what are the two barriers that they tend to struggle with? One is money. They don't have a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of time. So I thought, okay, if I could create a community learning experience where they could come in, wouldn't take a lot of time, wouldn't cost a lot of money, but they could get equipped, that would be great. And so I also knew that if I wanted to keep the budget down, I couldn't hire expensive speakers, leaders. But I thought, anybody who's been in a leadership position for a while and been successful probably has at least one best practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I started asking around and getting to know some of the leaders in the community. And I said, would you be willing to speak? And I would sit and talk with them, and together we would mutually identify a best practice, a topic that I would say, do you have a book that kind of reflects that topic? Because if people could take a book with them for less than $30, they've got another great tool. So for the price of the lunch club, listening to the speaker and maybe getting a book, they
Mm-hmm.
could have a lot of value. And then, when I started off, I was basically subsidizing it with my consulting dollars.
Wow.
Because we didn't have any sponsors. And the ticket price that I charged was not a whole lot more than the price of the lunch. And we decided to have it at the country club. And I just wanted to create a nice environment for people to come to. And so, there's a time of networking, and they listen to a speaker. Then we have a Q&A, and they get a book recommendation. And
Wow.
it's been very successful. We've gotten just tremendous feedback.
Well, I think I'm very excited because you just highlighted Oops, and that's where we met.
Yes.
And yesterday at Oops, one of the women that came to Oops and another, like two people were so excited about the Leadership Lunch Club. I didn't tell you about one. I told you about one. One said that it really opened her eyes and it helped her reframe her last exit from business and help her move into her new project with a reframe, and just really opened her eyes and kind of cleared the deck. And the other one got a big transaction out of it. So things are happening at the Leadership Lunch Club, from what I hear.
Yeah, we've heard great stories of connections. For everybody, for attendees, for speakers, sponsors. We could not do it without our sponsors, honestly. We would either have to charge more ticket money, or we wouldn't be able to do it at all. So I so appreciate our sponsors have been responsible for us being able to do it this long. And for those that are listening to this that may not know Oops, can you tell a little bit about
Oh,
that?
sure. Oops. Oops is the Office of Possibilities, and it started about 3 years ago, and or more, maybe 3.5. It started out of the NMH Foundation and Common Ground, which is now Grove Incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have told us that they have had 450 people come through Oops. And Oops is a place not like BNI, not a networking place to make money off of each other at all. It's a place where you bring your business idea, whether it's for profit, not for profit, or if you've been in business and you want to just hang out with entrepreneurs, or you want to pick a brain about, hey, how did you do your social media campaign, or how are we going to deal with this new law about HR and time off? What are you doing about that? So each person gets an opportunity to speak for about 1 or 2 minutes, and they say their name and their business or their business idea, and they can do all three or one of a brag. For example, I would say, hi, I'm Rose Odette. I'm with Awake Technologies. I have a brag because my book just got published on Amazon. My ask would be I'm not really needing much of an ask, but my give is I invite these people to be on my podcast, on the Michigan Innovation Podcast. So that would be kind of the feel. And then after, people will come up and say, "Hey, yeah, I want to be on the podcast," or they'll talk. There's so much buzz. I mean, the volume in the room goes. Yesterday we had 35 people, I think, in the room. And so it's amazing. And I'm happy because that's where I met you.
Yeah, it's been great to be there, and I'm happy I met you
Yeah.
too.
It's always on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Alluvian over there on 8th Street in the Noble District of Traverse City. So that's what that's about.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a silly little question. Is kind of uh, it's a good question, I think. What is the difference between coaching and consulting? Is there a difference?
There is. And
What is
that's
it?
a great question. It's a very thin line, and coaching is more when somebody just wants a little more self-reflection. Um, they're not looking for specific expertise and solutions. Consulting is more, I don't have I don't have the expertise. I need technical information. I need you to give me advice. And coaching is I need to process something. I need to bounce something around with you. And so coaching is really asking powerful questions. It's helping somebody to reflect and really find their own answers. And a lot of times, it's we can't tell somebody what's going to work best for them and what's going on inside of them, but we can certainly ask questions. So, but what often happens in a coaching session, though, is sometimes they do get to the point where they do want some advice. And then I think in the coaching world, usually just you might say something like, "Do you want some advice right now?"
Mm,
Or I'm going to put on my consulting hat right now,
mm.
and it sounds like you might be a little stuck. Here's some options for you to consider, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. So could you give an example? So let me just make sure I understand. So coaching is, let's just go back to the example of a guy that can't read the room.
Okay.
All right, I can't read the room and I don't have the right vibe with my team.
Mm-hmm.
And you are, as a coach, you give them some guidance on how to better connect with their employees in a coaching environment. Is that right?
You mean while they're meeting with me as a
As a
coach?
coach, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a coaching experience.
And it could be a little consulting as well,
Okay.
depending, because they may, probably more coaching. I think you're right.
So
They're
that's
not really not looking for how do I get this, how do I do this strategy?
okay. But then if I came to you and said, I want that dynamic dual strategy that you mentioned, that you said that inside outside leadership or the different strengths to do, I would like to do an assessment of my company and find out like a deep dive on their skills.
Right. Yeah. How would you, what
Because
kinds,
I need to cultivate new leaders in my business.
right. So maybe what kind of assessment might I use? Or uh, I want to assess my culture. Do you have an employee engagement survey that you might
So that would be
recommend?
consulting.
Or like a group that I was just recently working with, they wanted strategic planning and they didn't know what model to use. And so we worked together and I basically consulted with them on and provided a model for them to use because they were starting from ground zero.
Mm.
And so they didn't have the expertise and they wanted the expertise.
What do you do when there's a stick in the mud culture? How do you work with not the whole culture, but let's say you've got kind of a leader that really wants to engage, but then you run across, and I think this happens more than not, that you probably get some resistance to change because people don't like to change. So how do you deal with that type of experience?
So are you talking more individually
No,
or
I'm talking back in the
in the
consulting,
organizational?
yeah, organizational change.
Mhm. I think that's a challenge. So one of my favorite authors for organizational change is John Kotter. He has a book called Leading Change.
Hmm.
And one of the things he suggests to help move people out of inertia, because that's kind of a law of um, that things tend to stay where they are unless acted upon.
Right.
And we're humans as we do that. So one of the things he suggests is to create a sense of urgency. And how do you do that? How do you create a sense that we have to change? Because the price of not changing is worse than the cost of changing. So one example I use from my music background. So when I was in Lansing, our band was playing at a bar, and the owner or manager came over to the stage and said, don't want any panic or anything like that, but there's a fire in the kitchen. So we're going to have to get everybody out. And unfortunately, where we were downstairs, and the only way out was one stairwell up to get out the door. And so he said, you're not going to have a chance to pack everything up. You might want to just take your guitars, but I'm going to get up to the microphone and I'm going to ask people to start to leave. And so at this point, there was no sign that there was anything going on because we didn't see the kitchen or anything. And so he went up to the microphone and said, everybody don't panic, but we need all of you to in an orderly fashion, get out. Well,
Get out.
not only was there not panic, nobody moved because they were taking their pictures.
Oh, they wanted their beer with them.
I paid for this picture. I'm going to get every drop. So finally, you know what happened? You know what got them moving?
What?
When the smoke from the kitchen, they started all of a sudden to smell some of the smoke.
Oh, so then they decided that.
So and the manager went table to table. So I think the job of a leader is to help people smell the smoke.
Okay, very good metaphor.
That's I thought of that when I later got trained on change management.
Yeah.
What do we share? Whether it's stats, whether it's the price that we're paying with the consequences. We have to help people understand. We can't just say, "Hey, folks, we need to change." Boom. Next week, here's what we need to do.
Sense of urgency. That's really very important. I love that. So we are doing so well here. So what's next for you? What's going on? What's next on your horizon?
Well, I think, with the Leadership Lunch Club, we want to continue to bring topics that are of value to people. I think it's always exciting and interesting to find new leaders. I remember when I first started in 2012, some people said, aren't you concerned you're going to run out of people? This is a small town that you're not going to have enough people to speak. But there's always new people coming into town, new people coming into leadership positions, new things happening. So I think we want to just continue to build a good foundation with that. And in my own coaching practice, I want to focus more on 3 coaching areas that I'm focusing on right now. Executive coaching, leadership coaching, because like I said, that's high impact. Career coaching, and that's something that just sort of, I all of a sudden started getting a lot of people asking me, I want to make a career change. And having been in HR for most of my life in some capacity, it's something that I can do, but I also enjoy doing it because it's helping people see, it's using some of the tools that I've talked about. It's helping them understand where are their strengths, where's their passion, where's their gifting, what's their style, and where would they be a good fit, helping them to put a resume together and all that. And then kind of a newer field that I got certified in, and that's retirement coaching.
Oh, very
As
cool.
I've gotten older, and I realized there's 10,000 people a day retiring now.
Wow.
So the concept behind this retirement coaching is get the coaching before you retire so you can prepare for it. Because in retirement, you lose a lot of what you had when you worked.
Your identity.
Identity, structure, community, sense of purpose. And some people they feel lost.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to be able, so I do an assessment. There's a retirement assessment that I do, and it helps them understand how prepared are they to replace some of those things. And could they start putting their toe in the water right now? Like if they want to volunteer somewhere, could they start doing that now? If they want to start a business they've always wanted to start, how could they start putting their toe in the water? And
come to Oops.
There you go. Good idea.
Wow, so that's very exciting. I'm so happy you're going to keep going with the Leadership Lunch Club and executive coaching, career coaching, and retirement coaching. That sounds like you are going to be super See,
Well, it's all part of equipping. I mean, it's using a lot of the same skills and concepts and assessments. It's just in a different context.
right.
But I love it because it's equipping and it's helping people step in to something that's going to improve the quality of their life, and that motivates me.
Aw.
I just want to make a positive difference.
Oh, that's amazing. What a great note to end on. Well, I know you probably enjoyed this as much as I did. I haven't stopped smiling ear to ear. My cheeks hurt because I have enjoyed this conversation so much.
This is kind of your wheelhouse too, right?
Yeah, I'm very, very into this stuff. And I just am so excited to do whatever we can to spread the word on what Barb does. And we will definitely put her website and the Leadership Lunch Club's, all of that details in the show notes. You'll definitely be able to engage with her, whether you're looking for consulting, executive coaching, retirements around the corner for you, or you're in the midst of it and you're feeling that angst of identity crisis and you or your wife or your husband wants you out of the house because
Yeah, that's one of the challenges.
that's it. I know that seems so common. And you know who to call, and that is Barb Jordan. And so, is there anything last words you'd like to share with the team?
I would like to thank you, Rose, for all
Oh,
that you're doing,
thank
for
you.
giving people like me an opportunity. And you've had so many people that you've helped to highlight. So I can tell that's a passion of yours, and thank you so
Oh, it
much.
was a pleasure. It was such a pleasure. And so until next time, see you next time. Bye.
Bye.